Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to Energy Connects in association with ADIPEC. My name is Rebecca McLaughlin-Easton, and I will be your host for today. We are delighted that so many of you can join us from all around the world for this in-depth conversation about the crucial role of decarbonisation strategies and the future of energy. Our panel discussion takes place ahead of ADIPEC 2022, which will run from October 31st until November 3rd. With the subject of decarbonisation not only critical to the event, but also, of course, the future of shaping the global energy landscape as we transition to a low-carbon world. To give their insight, I have an esteemed lineup of guests from the energy and technology industry. In a moment, I'll introduce you to them. But before we get down to business, allow me to run through some housekeeping notes. I can see that great numbers of you have joined us from all around the world. A very warm welcome to you. We would love to get your input on our discussions and kindly use the on-screen guide provided to send me your questions from now onwards. Secondly, we encourage you to sign up online for Energy Connect to keep abreast of future upcoming webinars, industry news, views, videos, and much, much more. Just head to energyconnects.com for complete access. And so, without further ado, let's get down to business. Allow me to introduce to you my revered guests for today's discussion about decarbonisation. First up, we have Alessandro Brescani. Now, Alessandro joins me from Italy, and he is the Senior Vice President of Climate Technology Solutions for Baker Hughes, which of course is an energy company encompassing carbon capture, utilization and storage, hydrogen, emissions management, and clean and integrated power solutions. Alessandro is responsible for defining the strategy and operational product and solution management to really support energy and broader industrial segments in achieving their net zero ambitions. Ciao, Alessandro. How are you?
Good. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Rebecca. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Next up, we have Eli Adaimi. He is the Group Director for Business Development, Tech and Innovation at the privately owned Gulf Cryo. Gulf Cryo is one of the major industrial gases manufacturers in the Middle East and Gulf region, and it is leading in clean CO2 production by investing intensely in carbon capture for heavy industries. Gulf Cryo has operated in more than 10 countries across the region for quite some considerable time, with a strong focus on growth and business opportunities presented there. And Eli has more than 20 years of experience focusing on developing clean, innovative gas solutions for various industries. Eli, it's great to see you. A warm welcome.
Thank you, Rebecca.
I'm also delighted to say that I'm joined by Yalda Daghi. She is the Business Development Director of Sustainable Technology Solutions for the Middle East region for Honeywell. Yalda is a chemical engineer with a wealth of experience in the oil and gas sector, and she's passionate about many topical industry aspects, not least digital transformation, critical infrastructures, and achieving economic and environmental sustainability goals. She joins us from the UAE. Yalda, it's lovely to see you. How are you today?
Same here, and thank you so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. We're delighted to have you on board. And completing the stellar lineup for you is Roger Nunu. He is the Global Sales Director for Digital Transformation and IIoT 2.0 Solutions at Impact2, which is, of course, a Molex business. Roger has more than 3 decades of experience in major account sales of industrial software and IoT solutions for the energy and oil and gas industry. He helps clients with the full life cycle of digital transformation solutions, which has, of course, helped them reduce emissions, optimize compliance, as well as enhance their maintenance and safety records, to name a few. It's great to have you join us from the Lone Star State of Texas. Roger, hello, and how are you?
Hello, good morning, everyone, from my time zone, and I look forward to meeting and seeing everyone at the ADIPEC conference very shortly.
We can't wait to see you on the ground. Great to have you here. And so, without further ado, let's get down to business. The context is clear. Fossil fuels, including oil, coal and natural gas, supply around 80% of the world's energy. But as we know, there is a need for a workable model for energy transition, one that is resilient enough to truly absorb external shocks and yet pragmatic enough to reduce emissions linked to human activities. A growing number of governments and businesses are, of course, announcing emission goals, creating the pathway to a low-carbon future, and energy companies will play a significant part in this transition and will be a leading voice on how it is achieved. Many of the innovations and technologies that we are seeing come to light are just part of the process, and of course the oil and gas sector is central to our conversations. So critical when we're looking towards meeting those net zero targets, which will require not only an overhaul of the energy sector with CCUS, hydrogen, reducing methane emissions and new technology, all key components in this process. So forgive the pun, but let's drill down into the issues, and do keep your questions coming in from the audience, but let me start with some of mine. Alessandro, let me come to you first, speaking on behalf of Baker Hughes. How do you foresee the significant potential of CCUS to really contribute to the energy transition and help not only countries, but also companies meet their net zero targets?
Thank you, Rebecca. Powerful question, actually. Listen, nobody has a silver bullet today to reduce emissions. Okay, we need to play around multiple technology. We need to play around multiple actions. We need to work on the efficiency on what is installed today. We need to work on new energy, means renewable, new fuel. Nuclear is going to come back and play again there, and then the utilization of the methane is going to require some adjustment too. But then there's going to be a play on the carbon capturing here, which is going to be extremely important. A few data points just to give you a little bit the sense of the order of magnitude that we are talking about. In order to get, and we need to play with the scenarios. Obviously, we need to have the scenarios in front of us. In order to get, let's say, climate just above 2 degrees, okay, in 2050, you need to reduce the current level of emission by 2/3. So today we are probably around close by between 38 and 40 billion tons of emissions in CO2. Means that you need to go down around the 17, 18 billion tons of emissions. When you pick up 2050, which is a little bit the target that everybody are looking for, the carbon capturing has to contribute to that reduction for about 20-25%. So short answer, Rebecca, is massive. Carbon capture is going to be massive. And the reason why it's going to be so much is because obviously we need to deal with whatever is installed, whatever is the plant that we have today, and we need to deal with the existing asset in order to get the reduction down. Obviously, are going to come to contribute for the entire net zero plan, everything, all the rest of the technology, but definitely carbon capture is going to be probably one of the most important one in terms of application that we are going to need to implement.
For sure, thank you. Ellie, let me come to you. Massive, that's the key word there from Alessandro. Let me ask you the same question. How do you foresee the significant potential of CCUS contributing to the overall energy transition?
Yes, I totally agree with what Alessandro was saying. Carbon capture is essential, one of the main essential solutions in order to reduce CO2 emissions, especially the ones which are technically and expensive or difficult to abate for such. So that's why CCUS is the main contributor for a net zero target achievement. But just to structure my answer, I could put three major contributions for CCUS in net zero goals. The first one is to retrofit existing assets, because currently we are emitting CO2 with what we have today. Okay, we are improving our systems in order to be more sustainable and so on, but what can we do with our existing assets? So the first thing to be done, and which is being done, is to retrofit existing fossil fuel-based power and heavy industries like cement, metallurgy, waste to energy. Just to keep in mind that in 2030, even after almost 8 years from now, half of the CO2 captured will still come from retrofitted existing assets. This is the first point. The second point is we combine always CO2 with hydrogen, right, for the energy transition. And this is where the CCUS will be a great support for the transition. We are all talking about from blue hydrogen to green hydrogen. So this is a major driver into upscaling the low carbon hydrogen production, especially in geographies like in the Middle East, where you will still have low cost fossil fuel production of hydrogen, and it has to be combined with CCS, and you have CO2 storage for that. So this is the second contribution. The third one, and it will be the last, at least for my intervention now, it is to contribute in developing the downstream utilization of the captured CO2. So currently, unfortunately, at least it's my opinion, we are focusing on existing and upcoming projects to sequestrate that non-desired CO2. So we are focusing on the S letter in the CCUS. Whether I think we need to be really proactive approach by putting in use that currently non-desired CO2 by developing applications into that, and to create a value of the CO2 and giving it a new life for that CO2, which is currently only considered as a waste where we are struggling to control it. And Gulf Cryo, currently we are now and before, as mastering the CO2 value chain, we are promoting intensively utilization of that CO2 in various industries.
Thank you so much, Ellie. So much to talk about here, Yalda. The same opening question to you. Do you agree with what you've heard from the other delegates so far? We need to be more proactive. We need to be better focused, and especially in developing utilization and applications. Yalda, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. So if we break down the CCUS into carbon capture, utilization, and then sequestration, actually, the carbon capture technologies are already ready now, available technologies that are out there. Like first larger scale project that injected CO2 into the ground came on a stream in early 70s in Texas. And many of the pre-combustion and post-combustion technologies that we see today, the backbone of it is the same technology that has been implemented in the oil and gas for over so many years. So what we are doing here, actually, we are customizing it. For example, the solvent system has been there forever. But what we have recently done at UOP, we have worked with the University of Texas at Austin in order to come up with this new solvent that is robust, that can tolerate the challenging environment of post-combustion CO2 capture, which is lower partial pressure of the CO2, presence of the waste gases, etc., to come up with a unit that is more efficient. Smaller equipment, less utility, and providing high purity CO2 at higher pressures at the fence. Also, apart from working on separate technologies to make them most efficient, we also have to look at all available technologies and then make a hybrid solution out of it. And again, this is the area that UOP really stands in a very unique position, because we have a whole range of technology from membrane, adsorbent, cryogenic, and solvent. And when we combine them, it becomes extremely powerful and way more efficient for our clients to tackle their challenges. That is for carbon capture. Utilization, the challenge there is that CO2 is a stable molecule. And if you want to break it and convert it into other products, it's very energy intense. And if that energy is coming from fossil fuel itself, it's defeating the purpose, right? So this is the challenge that we are facing here. That's why there is a lot going on right now in R&Ds to see what else we can do with CO2, apart from, for example, utilization in urea or beverage, etc. But again, we have to be realistic. If we want to meet our targets by 2030, there will be 840 million tons more than that, release CO2 that has to be captured. There is no way that there is one market to capture all of that. So that's why it's expected that more than 90% of the CO2 will eventually be sequestrated.
Rebecca, you're on mute.
Rebecca, we cannot hear you in case.
I'm back in the room. You mean you breathe? I'm back in the room. Roger, Yalda seemed to sum it up perfectly there. The challenges are huge. We are developing solutions, but we also need to be, it's that word again, pragmatic. We need to be realistic about what can be done. Talk to me about your stance on the current crisis that we're facing and the challenge that we've been talking about. But also we've had a question, a more broad question, which has come from the audience. Thank you for sending them in, which you can follow up on afterwards. So let's start by talking about where exactly we stand on the timeline in the emergence for these viable, cost-effective CCUS technologies that really need to help the governments and the corporates alike. What's your take?
And I totally agree with Yalda, actually, as far as there's so many technologies. The problem is those technologies need to turn CCSU into from a concept to a reality. And that's really, I look at it from three simple aspects in that. One is to quantify it, know what your problem is, and kind of try to improve on it. You cannot improve what you cannot measure, right? So, and then I look at it from a codify. Let's do some automations to do faster transformation so you can do less of the missteps. And finally implement it, but then implement it in the smaller chunks to make it very simple, very easy for the folks on the ground to what I call the boots on the ground, to actually the users of this and to be able to be updated, refresh, and become more efficient. So for the users will be easier to transform into that arena. So I look at it from a smaller areas rather than let's take on the whole world and try to reduce it. We have short time here. 2030 and 2050 is coming right around the corner. And what's next after that 2050, right? So when we hit that 2050, my question becomes, what's next?
And we will send that question back to you in just a moment. What's next? We've had a question from the audience. Let me put it to you, seeing as I have you in the hot seat, Roger. What can or should the industry do to really come together and have a unified, unwavering vision about decarbonisation? And I suppose this is a question more about not only energy companies, but also technology ones, and perhaps governments too, working in silos. What can we do to really come together?
So I would say from an energy perspective, in the oil and gas industry specifically, we like to be kind of the last in the moving in the technology space versus the other vertical, medical, et cetera. So we're the laggards in that, but I think that's really because of safety and regulations, et cetera. So totally understandable. But I think the industry is also very reactive to the issues raised by regulatories, by NGO organizations, et cetera. So I think we need to, and there's also the few companies who are actually leading the industry. I call it more or less, it's analysis paralysis, what they're going for, doing the small pilots and a lot of small projects to get going and to start dabbling in this. We're not there yet, unfortunately. And the technology is there to, it needs to be more commitment from governments. It needs to be more commitments from, not just by throwing dates and say, let's target at those dates, but more proactive, more collaboration between the governments and the companies to come out to say, let's share this information together. Let's see what the lessons are learned and not become more silos.
Thank you. Ellie, let me come back to you with another question. What has been the progress so far on really eliminating methane emissions from the upstream oil and gas industry? Is it amongst the best short-term opportunities for the industry to really contain those GHG emissions?
Thank you for the question. Just to mention, global methane emission is not in the core business of Gulf Cryo, but I can give my input, my humble input into that. methane emissions have been reduced, in the last 2 years of COVID due to decreased oil and gas production due to COVID. And in 2021, it's starting again to increase. So, and to keep in mind that by net zero emission targets, it's a short-term ambition that between 2020 and 2030, 75% of methane emissions should be cut. But where do we stand today? So, unfortunately, major of large emitters, they are currently have been able to shield themselves, either by non-reporting their existing emissions or not monitoring their emissions. So, in order to make it successful, but it's a short-term opportunity. It is by more transparency. It's a straightforward thing, but it's by more transparency, more stringent industrial standards, and implementation of monitoring systems. This is on the technical side. Now, on the commercial, and we know that all our businesses are driven commercially. So just a simple calculation about average current natural gas price, easily half, maybe more, I don't know, of those methane emissions could be avoided, considering the cost of abating those methane emissions compared to the market value of those additional gas that can be recovered or that can be captured. So yes, I would consider it a short-term opportunity, since it's a way of how to make things happen, and not more, not less.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Short-term opportunities, is it amongst the best? More stringent industrial standards, to name but a few things we need to consider. Alessandro, agree or disagree?
I tend to agree. Obviously, there's a lot of depends that we need to articulate here, but for sure, this is the short term. So you need to eliminate the leakages that you have on the methane side. There's no doubt. You need to work on the efficiency when you use the methane for power generation or mechanical drive whatsoever. So you need to work on those aspects, because this is really something that is going to contribute right away. So eliminating leakages, working on efficiency is going to have a better, let's say, utilization of the fuel that determine the leakage. So this is definitely something that can happen. Those are projects that for the customer in general are already in the money. You don't need to wait or having the support on any kind of support from the government, from the association, et cetera, et cetera. So those are really projects that can be deployed right away. One aspect we didn't touch base here, my colleague here has been very much touched base on multiple aspects that are extremely important. There's an aspect of awareness that goes together with the measurement of the emission. This is one of the progress has been done, really, and we need to continue to work on that, because awareness is going to drive really intention that goes versus the resolution of the issues, and we need to work as an overall industry or overall industries to come with obviously then the solution and the implementation of the mitigation factor that are going to help to take out the methane emission. So multiple aspects that require to be touched, but definitely, yes, this is something that is going to be in the money now, is a short-term resolution of a significant problem.
Thank you so much, Alessandro. Yalda, let me come to you. Short-term solution for a long-term problem. We also need greater awareness to really drive the goals and find solutions to these challenges. What's your stance?
So true. Actually, methane emissions, not only they are an issue because they are more than 25% of the global warming that we are experiencing today is coming from methane emissions, but also it's a huge loss there is a huge loss associated with that. Actually, just in 2021, it was estimated that $19 billion was wasted through the emissions. So we certainly have to do something about it. And the source of that is either fugitive or process venting, right? What is happening nowadays, mainly in the plant, is that the operator is in charge of checking the equipment to make sure that there is no fugitives, emissions, etc. But this is subject to human error, and this is periodic. We need a solution that is continuous, that enables continuous supervision on what's going on. And the moment the leakage happens, so that the refinery or the plant owner can take an action to fix it and to repair it, or even go beyond that and do predictive actions that they have to take. Like they have access to all that data, we can pull in all of that data, and then the moment we see something is not working right and most likely is going to result in leakage in the future, they can take action proactively. So this continuous monitoring and detection to qualify the emissions, and also being able to classify them to see where they come from and to identify the cause of the emission, this is the key. And this is the area that us in high-level process solution are very active in it. And also we have the range of products such as Rebellion cameras that can detect methane up to the range of 1,700 meters. So we need all of this solution combined with a holistic approach in order to tackle this issue, certainly.
Thank you. I have an audience question for you. Here we go. In the short term, how can large gas producers such as the UAE develop a green hydrogen economy when blue hydrogen is more suitable considering the existing energy infrastructure? Hot topic indeed. Yalda, what are your thoughts?
So it's pretty much the question is green hydrogen versus blue. Is that what we are asking here? Okay. Yeah. So we are very fantastic. We are actually very excited, obviously, about green hydrogen. And that's the area that in the region is the high priority. But we know that green hydrogen, as of now, does not have the scale and is not economically viable to address the need that we are facing today. That's why we believe blue hydrogen is certainly a key and must be implemented now, because it's a ready now technology at lower cost that can provide that hydrogen that we desperately need. And if you even look at the life cycle carbon intensity of blue hydrogen with 90 to 98% carbon capture, it approaches that of the green hydrogen with 100% solar or power wind. So in our view, both of them has to be developed in parallel, and certainly we are also working with the electrolyzer companies in order to bring the cost of the electrolyzer stack down by introducing catalyst-coated membranes, but also purifying that hydrogen that, regardless of where it's come from, if it's green or blue, so that it can be used in the downstream units for different applications. Hydrogen is a very exciting topic. I can go on that for 1 hour, which I won't.
Absolutely. We need another webinar just for hydrogen. Well, let's stick with it because it was on our hot topics to debate, and there's plenty of interest from the audience about it. Roger, let me come to you next. What are the ways in which hydrogen, as we've been discussing, can really truly become the successful solution for a decarbonized, greener future?
So, one interesting part is I was reading a study that just was about maybe a 2 years old study, but it talks about the, GH study. It says 70% is from the energy coming from it, and then 19% is coming from architecture. And we don't hear that story much, actually, in what's going on that. It's mainly coming on the energy side. So, but it's really, I think it's a whole changing our daily lives from an individual that this affects then the industry. So, that's that whole aspect of changing that consumer life to the industrial work, what's going to affect the total industry for a greener future.
Thank you so much. Alessandro.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi. how would you outline the ways in which hydrogen can really become the most successful solution for us in the decarbonisation process?
It's going to become successful, more successful, I mean, together with the rest. Okay, we've been talking here. We need to work across the board with all the potential solution, carbon capture in hydrogen, new kind of way to produce power, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to work around the entire spectrum here. Definitely, there's a big boost today. Recently, United States have been issuing all the policy around let's say the facilitation for hydrogen investment that are quite good actually. There's countries like in Middle East that are extremely active because they want to become really a production pole for hydrogen. So, and there's a really entire continent that are going to be importer of hydrogen. I'm talking about Europe in particular. So together has to go, again, you need to have the policy in place. So you need to have the facilitation in order to start with the utilization of hydrogen that today is still a little bit expensive, if you will, required to go down with the price per kilogram in order to be really competitive with the alternative fuel. Obviously, we need to consider methane doing this kind of exercise in the normal kind of condition, not really where they are today. And then you need to work on standards, industrial standards. I mean, you need to have all the supply chain connected in order to work on the same standards when you talk about technical specs, in order to have things that can match each other. I'm talking about refueling station, I'm talking about engines, I'm talking about pipelines. You need to qualify the pipelines for hydrogen too. So there's multiple things that has to come to play, but those are the important one. I think we are getting in a moment where things are starting to move. What is still missing in the market in general is some significant offtake of hydrogen. So when you start to see offtake coming through, means that the chain is going to align. It's not going to be probably perfect at the beginning, but when you connect the production with utilization, then is gonna drive all the rest. And so next step that we need to see is really an offtake of hydrogen, and then I do believe it's gonna start to be useful, number one, and number two, then it's gonna become successful.
Thank you very much. Ellie, I'll come to you in just a moment, but Yalda, I want to kick the ball back to you. In terms of what is still missing and what needs to be done within the hydrogen market, that's my first part of the question to you, picking up on what Alessandra was saying. But also talk to me about what is missing on the policy side, and the uniform standardization is so important to this conversation when we talk about hydrogen and where we go from here.
Sure. Actually, in order to make this work, the whole ecosystem has to be there. That includes the supply, the demand, and the infrastructure in place. And we have to think about, okay, we're producing this hydrogen, green hydrogen here, where we have access, we are blessed with sun, we have the green power. And then how we can, and we are producing green hydrogen out of that. And now this green hydrogen, we want to be able to transport it, to move it around and bring it to the area that are not blessed, for example, with that sun or with that wind. So the whole infrastructure has to be in place in order for this to work beautifully. So not only discussions are critical with respect to how we can supply the hydrogen and where is the demand, and again, on the demand, hydrogen at point of use does not create any CO2, so it's extremely interesting in any sustainability activity, related activity for decarbonization of the plants. So that can replace the natural gas, right? But definitely as a sustainable fuel. But also then, how are we going to transport this around? There are different ways. We can use pipeline, we can use trucks, or we can put it on the ship as a form of a liquid hydrogen, or convert it to ammonia, methanol, or using liquid organic hydrogen carrier to do that. There are advantages and disadvantages related to each of these technologies. Of course, when we have to make a decision on how to move this hydrogen around, three items are, I think, critical to take into account. One of them is the cost of the packing and unpacking the hydrogen. One of them is the cost of the vessel or of that pipeline. And the other is the purity of the hydrogen that you need in the final destination. Obviously, if you liquefy the hydrogen, then little processing is required to make it back to the gaseous form. But then all that journey, you should have maintained that hydrogen at minus 250 degrees C. So that's very expensive and that's complicated for the vessel. So there is a trade-off. Recently, there was an article research done by Rethink Energy that predicted that in the future, pipeline and liquid organic hydrogen carriers will dominate the hydrogen trade in the world. And again, when it comes to liquid organic hydrogen carriers, we are very active as European data space, and we're more than happy to provide more information to those who are interested on that front.
Well, let me tell you, everybody's interested in this topic. The questions are flooding in thick and fast. So thank you very much to our global audience. Do keep sending them in. I'll do my best to put as many as I can to my esteemed guests. Ellie, I do want to come to you for your take. In the short term, as we've been discussing, how can these large gas producers really develop the green hydrogen economy? Because as we know, the infrastructure is still in its infancy. What are your thoughts on that?
As mentioned before by Yalda, hydrogen is one of my favorite topics as well. So on a macro level, we should consider two things in order to make hydrogen successful in greening the energy. The first one is scaling up technologies, and the second point is to reduce the cost of hydrogen to make it more widely used. Now, what are the major key factors in order to make that happen? The first one, as mentioned by Alessandro, is to put hydrogen at the core of mid-long-term strategies on a national or regional level. This is one point, but also is to involve main industrial gas companies in the region, like our company as Gulf Cryo, because we are historically mastering the gases among CO2, hydrogen, and such. And we know quite well how to control the value chain of hydrogen, and it is combined with the CO2 management for such. This is the first point. The second point is to, now it's on the strategy, but we cannot stay on a strategy side. We have to stimulate commercial demand for that hydrogen. So we need to create that demand. So this would come through two things. The first one is further investment, because we can talk for hours, but if there are no money, we cannot develop. So the investment is a key driver to attract, to convince, and this will bring down the cost of hydrogen production. This is one part, and second part is to create demand for that hydrogen, to adopt hydrogen in markets which up to now have been, the hydrogen has been absolutely absent, which is mobility. This is where we are starting to talk about domestic use and industries. The third one is, let's say, if we're talking about our region in the Middle East, we need to have local initiatives for R&D and even drive some pilot project in the region. This is very important in order to prove efficiency and performance in the economic and geographic reality of our region. Because if we are taking a technology which has been developed in North America or Europe, it might not be that efficient in our region. This is where, during my exchanges with technology provider and so on, we start to talk about tropicalization of the technology, because we are in hot climate, in aggressive saline atmosphere, so this is important. And also the stimulation of R&D should come from government actions to put public funds, to attract private capital for innovation in order to create that viable ecosystem to lead pilot projects in the region. The last two points is to create hydrogen hubs, like they are doing currently in Saudi Arabia. They are trying to where some like Yambu, like Jeddah region or South region, that are trying to create a CCUS hub. We should also think about having hydrogen hubs. It's not immediate term, but this should come. Industrial ports, industrial basins, and we have a emerging nice example of Rotterdam port in the Netherlands. So why not having such in our region, especially that Saudi Arabia and UAE, they are looking to be exporter of energy for such. And the last one is to use existing infrastructure of gas infrastructure, as mentioned by the other gentleman, is to connect the production remote site with the point of use. So if you want to have on a city scale domestic use of hydrogen, we can tackle and we can bypass the continuous problem of transportation, how to transport hydrogen. Would it be in liquid phase? Would it be in compressed phase? So it's to use existing infrastructure of gas to make it happen. So for me, hydrogen it's a marvelous molecule which has the whole features to make a great green transition. It's light, it's storable, it's the energy dense, and the most important part is that it is a versatile. You can use it in many applications to decarbonize the society. And I could even call it the hydrogen as the Swiss knife of decarbonization. So you can use it in many, many ways to decarbonize our society.
I love it. I think these might be hydrogen's new hashtags on Instagram. A marvelous molecule that it is. We have a question that's come in from our audience. Ellie, let me stay with you for a second. The amount of gas flaring, especially in Africa, is huge. What are your thoughts to it as regards to the high foreign investments in gas gathering projects in Africa?
Oh, so sorry for that. Regarding if it is methane, about methane?
The question is the amount of gas flaring, especially in Africa, is huge. What are your thoughts, not least when it comes to the high FDI flows in terms of gas gathering projects in Africa?
Yeah, regarding gas flaring, I'm not a specialist for Africa for that question. I may keep it maybe for other colleagues who could have a better answer for that, Rebecca. Sorry for that.
Who would jump in terms of giving an opinion on the gas flaring and what this means for the high amount of foreign investment really being contributed over there? Yalda, Alessandro?
Yeah, I can jump in here. Definitely is a problem. Again, methane emission is a problem anywhere. Even when you manage quite well the flaring, everything that you flare is a problem. And was really Yalda before. It's a problem for multiple reasons. Number one, because it's one of the biggest contributors to the creation of the CO2 in the atmosphere, number one. Number two, is also a financial loss, quite significant for the producer of methane. Managing the flare, today there's technology that is going to optimize the flaring. You're not going to get completely out of the flaring, but you can manage the flaring in the proper way, minimizing what you're gonna flare. The flare is needed because you need to burn the gas that eventually you need to evacuate in order to have just CO2 and not methane, in order to reduce the impact that you're going to have in the atmosphere. So there's a technical aspect that has to be contemplated there. Africa is not different than any other countries, actually. Obviously there's some concentration where you have a massive production of gas, of methane in particular, as it is somewhere else in the world. Okay, but the technology is available. The technology is available. OGCI, which is the association we are part and where all the major oil company has been and been part, and now national companies start to be part of. They sign in order to reduce to zero the emission of methane within 2030. So we are very active there. We can deploy technology. You go back on my observation before, making people aware that there's emission and there's emission of methane is extremely important, because when you start to realize it, this is one of the solutions that for the customer, our customer, can be in the money right away. Going back again on what Yalda was mentioning. So awareness is important. campaign of communication is extremely important. And then you need to come with a practical solution that can help the resolution of the problem. You need to go down side by side, so production point by production point. Require times, require campaign, but of a commercial campaign and then technical campaign to go through. But we got everything today to approach and attack the problem. So zero methane emission by 2030 is really possible. It's possible for the globe, not just for Middle East, not just for Africa, not just for North America. It's possible across the board. Satellite today can catch any kind of emission based on methane. You can have pictures in multiple days. And so you can build back the entire story of the emission on the specific plant. So there's instrument around to catch the emission, and there's technology around really to be implemented right away to reduce the problem.
Thank you so much. Roger, let me bring you in on this. We do need to move the conversation on, although we could spend the full hour talking about hydrogen. We want to get your opinion. The audience would like to know what your take is about the potential, albeit unintended, environmental risks of technologies like CCS, CCUS, soil erosion, groundwater pollution, methane leakages, and the like. What would you give us as your outlook for where we go from here?
So, Impact 2 is a technology company, right? And that's one of the things that we talk about a lot is companies right now are looking at, and especially the technology companies are looking what they call the industrial things 1.0 is a solution over focus on technology and under delivering on the transformation for the boots on the ground. And those are the operators, right? And that's what Yelda was mentioning earlier. So then that's what causes a lot of issues where you start doing proof of concept that we're asking for, but then what happens is because the boots on the ground are not in part of the technology part of it, the projects are not moving forward with it. So in a way, that's what Impact started talking about, the IoT 2.0. Let's focus on those boots on the ground and have a sensor software technology like we do, where you measures that's methane, right? And let's look at where the methane leaks are happening, and then give you some kind of a triangulation to say, by this area where you're going to find the leak, go find it. So be more proactive, be more predictive on the solution. And then that gives you, on top of all of this, what's the health of that sensor? What is the data-driven insight to be for the operator to trust and have quick adoption of that solution? So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is, what is that shift of the manual where you have to go in and kind of focus on where the leaks are and what's happening in those. That's what's going on in the industry. Having a sensor software solution that tells you when the leak is happening, and that same platform that actually gives you not only where the leak's happening, is the leak is happening in your facility or the neighboring facility? Or is it actually from a safety from those boots on the ground? Can I look on a mobile device and say, I'm walking into a dangerous area because there is a leak? Or no, there is not a leak happening in here, so I can walk with my standard PPE, with standard uniform to go in and do my right job. So there's a lot of different things, and usually that's what brings in the technology, the operators, the folks on the ground to come up with a great solution.
Thank you so much. I want to come on to investment before we come to the offerings that ADIPEC will have on the ground relating to our topic this October. But Yelda, let me come back to you. What are the new areas of investment required for the energy, the oil and gas sector to really succeed in their decarbonisation efforts? Can you outline for us some of the low carbon technology strategies that we're looking at? We've touched upon many, but what else is out there?
So basically, there are different pillars that the refineries can consider in their decarbonization path. We already talked about the carbon capture in depth, so we covered that. But that only addresses the scope 1 emission. But knowing that 70 to 90% of the emissions from the refineries is Scope 3, that tells us that something significant has to be done in that area to address that. And one of the main contributors to refineries' Scope 3 emissions are the emissions that are arising from the combustion of the fossil fuel that they are making. So here we come back to that strategic shifts. Refineries can shift from making the fossil fuel into sustainable fuel. And there are technologies today, such as UOP's eco-fining technology that many refineries are now considering and many have already implemented, that allows making sustainable fuel that, that is not down the road as a Scope 3 is not going to make as much CO2 as it is with the case of fossil fuel, right? And the other thing, they can shift to making petrochemicals. Why is that possibly a solution? First of all, from revenue perspective, financials, that's very promising. There is a good demand for petrochemicals. But doing petrochemicals instead of fuel means that you are sequestering that carbon molecule in your plastic and polymer. Yes, I pronounce plastic, and I know there's huge sensitivity around that, but as long as that plastic does not end up in the ocean or in the landfill, and we can have a circular economy for it to revive it, which there are technologies for that, such as, again, UOP's chemical plastic circular technology, then that's not a problem. At least the carbon is in that plastic and is not emitted in the air, right? These are some high-level shifts. There are some quicker fixes. Anything that is optimization, that is doing more with less, that's sustainable, right? So pretty much trying to maximize the value from each barrel of oil that the refiner has, that is towards decarbonization. That's why, like at UOP, we are so focused on developing the latest generation of catalysts that would give you the highest yield, because that means you get more out of less, or any sort of optimization that can be of extreme value here. The other shift probably would be to trying to replace the feedstock with like whatever they are using in their furnaces with hydrogen, again, coming back to the topic of hydrogen, because again, at the point of use, that does not create CO2 emissions. So there is a lot that can be done. Some require very major shifts. Some are actually short-term approaches, but that's a good thing that refineries can take incremental approaches in order to get their in fact, net zero targets if they have one.
Thank you very much. Alessandro, let me come back to you. And it's so interesting what Yalda was saying, not least on Scope 3 emissions. What would be your forecasts on how we can look to reduce them in the near and long term? And going back to the original question, where does investment need to be redirected in the short term when it comes to decarbonisation?
You're gonna see more and more coming on efficiency side. So there's going to be more coming down on the efficiency side. That's very consistent on what my colleagues today has been mentioning. So this is going to come. Probably is going to be the faster one. The detection of and the elimination of certain fugitives is going to be another one that is going to come through. And then we need to continue to invest really in technology for the future, which means everything that goes in carbon capturing. It's true that technology is available, okay? There's a new generation of technology that's to come to the market in the next 3-4 years, actually. And we need to make available for broader industries technology that is going to be suitable from a cost perspective. Because it's true that you have technology available today, but if you introduce in an upstream, let's say, plant, carbon capturing, post-combustion carbon capture, the project is going to struggle to go through the FID from a return perspective economically. So we need to really continue to invest in carbon capturing technology in order to be sure that we have a technology affordable going forward, given also the massive, let's say, activity we need to go through for the next 20 years here. So, and then hydrogen. hydrogen. I mean, all of those aspects require parallel, let's say, stream of investment and focus. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be a portfolio solution that is going to bring us to the net zero. It's not going to be just one solution that is going to be predominant to the others. I mean, it's too much. It's the broader spectrum of situation is going to drive for a portfolio.
Thank you. Yes, indeed, a portfolio of solutions and the broad spectrum that we need to address. For our final part of the conversation today, Ellie, let me come to you. We're looking ahead to ADIPEC 2022. We're delighted that it's back again this October, and we can't wait to see everybody on the ground there. How critical would you say the role of platforms like the Decarbonisation Zone at ADIPEC will be or are in terms of shaping the role of the energy sector and really accelerating that transition to the low carbon future?
Thanks for the question, Rebecca. So, as Gulf Cryo, we've been attending several editions of previous ADIPEC events as visitors. But this year, when we've been delighted to know that for the first time there will be a decarbonization zone allocated for such. And for this year, we are exhibitors and sponsors. So, and I wish that that decarbonization zone would, in other editions, would go even expand and further. So it's a key. It has a key role, these type of events, in order to create synergies and to accelerate the clean transition for such. And even if we're talking about like the Decarbonization Conference or other, I really think that we have even to push further by having interactive roundtables, having face-to-face exchanges among all industries, not only oil and gas, because decarbonization touch base all industries like metallurgy, cement, glass, metallurgy. Unfortunately, currently, each industry is looking for its own solution in its own corner, and the carbon management is being handled in silos. So if we take the tech providers for carbon capture from one side, if we take the ones who are handling the supply chain of captured CO2 from the other side, so there is currently no real visibility about what to do with that captured CO2. So this is where these type of events, it brings all together, all stakeholders together, covering the whole CO2 value chain, where they can sit together and have a holistic approach how to manage efficiently and pragmatically the CO2, for instance, from capturing to transporting to reuse and to sequestrate. So this is crucial, such events, to bring all people together and de-silo the approach of the whole CO2 value chain or even hydrogen.
Thank you, Ellie. Yalda, let me come straight to you. We need to de-silo. We need to get together and have cross-industry debates. It seems to be the way forward, and ADIPEC 2022 seems to be the place.
Absolutely. I would like to echo what Ellie said. I totally agree with that. ADIPEC is a platform that is bringing all the key players across this ecosystem together. It's enabling these dialogues to happen for everyone to know what's the latest and greatest technology out there. And this is so critical because just let me give you one example. Imagine you are the OEM. They want to know whether they should convert their equipment to run on sustainable fuel or not. They would only convert it if they are sure that there will be the guarantee of supply of such fuel. But suppliers need certainty of the demand, and they need to have access to the right technology at right cost. And the demand itself can be driven by the right policies and regulations. So you see that all of these pieces of this ecosystem, they are looking at each other. There is a need for transparency and dialogue so that everybody then decides and take action. And this is exactly what the events like ADIPEC is doing. We believe so much in it that actually they are sponsoring it. So I fully agree with what was said already by Ellie. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Roger, I take it that I will find you in the decarbonisation zone. I look forward to meeting you there and then. What will you be discussing with people? Which industry peers, cross-industry peers, will you be seeking out to move the conversation on?
So really, I mean, one thing, whenever when we saw the decarbonization zone, actually, we decided that this is no-brainer. We have to be a sponsor and become in there. I mean, just having this great panel that we've had and the topics we've talked about, and I'm seeing all the questions are coming through from the audience. I think it's going to be a very busy few days at the conference where we're all going to share, you know, what's going on, how things are going, and what's the best practices. I think that's where it's going to take us to the next step. Having a lot of webinars and Teams and Zoom and all that, but when people shake hands and see each other, I think that's where it's going to take us to the next step, to whatever that we need to achieve.
Thank you so much. Last quick word to you, Alessandro. I'm sure you're in agreement with us all that face-to-face business is always preferable. Thank goodness we're emerging from the post-COVID world. What will you be looking to achieve when you go to the decarbonisation zone at ADIPEC this year?
The same of my colleagues. Actually, it's going to be a pleasure to be there. I'm gonna be there with obviously with the rest of my company and my colleagues. We're going to be very present. We are sponsoring the event. I do believe it's a fantastic place to be, to talk with customers, to talk with peers in the industry. The spirit is being organized, is really facilitating the cooperation. Obviously, when we go into those events, we need to hear the voice of our customers, what they want to do, what they can do. There's a massive need in the industry and in different industries to cooperate if we want to be very simple, for two main reasons. Number one, technically, not necessarily the entire supply chain is covered. There's gaps. We need to create coalition in order to have the right flange between the different scope of supply, if you will. And this is a cultural shift that is happening actually in a different part of the world around how to approach a problem that is a global problem, which is really the emission one and the climate change. So would be great. It's going to be a great event, I'm sure. It's going to be super well organized as usual, and being there is going to be a privilege, and it's going to be also a privilege to be able to make some progress on our agenda.
Thank you so much, Alessandro, and that is the perfect note on which to end our conversation today. Sadly, ladies and gentlemen, the clock has beaten us. The sands of time have run away. We must leave our discussion there. So allow me, on behalf of myself and ADIPEC and everybody watching, to thank my fantastic guests, Alessandro, Eli, Yalda, and Roger. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Well, let me tell you more just before I say goodbye about the decarbonisation zone to all of you watching and listening online. It will be at ADIPEC, which takes place from the 31st of October until November 3rd. It will be positioned within Hall 12. It is a zone which has a fantastic range of facilities. It will be hosting and exhibiting companies, showcasing their technologies, solutions, products and services, those that haven't traditionally participated in ADIPEC before. So do take a look, and the Innovation Hub is one not to be missed. There is also, as my esteemed colleagues were saying, a packed conference agenda. You will gain so much from this. We do hope to see you there in person because there will be a presentation of many panel discussions, debates and TED Talks, and there are 4 main themes, from methane to CCUS to that golden molecule, hydrogen, and of course, new energies. For all the details, don't take my word for it, go to adipec.com and you will be well informed. Once again, as I did at the top, I just encourage you all to sign up to Energy Connect so that you can mark your diary for all upcoming webinars, industry news, views, and videos brought to you in association with ADIPEC. You can find that at energyconnects.com to learn more. And I should also tell you that you'll all be receiving an email from the Energy Connects team. They will send you the link to today's webinar, plus the presentation. And so until we meet on the ground in the UAE capital, let me just say take care and thank you again for watching. Goodbye.